The United Nations is carrying out a delicate operation to drain over 1 million barrels of oil from a decaying tanker off Yemen. The FSO Safer has been abandoned for years, threatening an ecological disaster. But after years of fundraising, a salvage mission is finally getting underway.
A rusting wreck off the coast of Yemen that experts say is a catastrophe waiting to happen. The Safer is carrying more than 1 million barrels of crude oil, and there's concern it could break apart at any moment. The tanker was being used as a floating storage facility for oil when Yemen's civil war broke out in 2015. Since then, it's been left to rot. In 2019, a team went on board and took these photographs. They show the extent of the neglect, even then. Pipes were leaking and valves rusting through. A small dot from space, the Safer could have a big environmental impact. A spill in the Red Sea would devastate wildlife, leave fishing communities destitute, and it would disrupt trade through the Suez Canal.
People have been talking about it, but not doing anything about it. This group has been able to do something about it. I believe we'll be successful. We'll continue to push forward until we succeed.
The United Nations raised money for the salvage operation from member states, private companies, and even the public through a crowdfunding campaign. It used some of the proceeds to buy its own tanker, called the Nautica. This animation shows the plan. The Nautica moves in close and docks with the Safer. Engineers board and gain access to its tanks. They lower pumps and then transfer the oil to the Nautica. Once it's empty, the tanker will be towed away to be scrapped.
The risks of something going wrong are real. They're palpable. And yes, if something were to go wrong, indeed, many questions would be asked. The only way we could answer that question is, well, walking away is not an option.
It won't be easy, but the UN says the alternative could be the biggest oil spill the world has ever seen.
And Achim Steiner, head of the United Nations Development Program, whom we just saw in the report, joins us now from New York. Mr. Steiner, welcome to DW. Now, the risks, you say it yourself, are huge and they are real. How confident are you that this mission is actually going to succeed?
Well, we are confident to have taken all possible steps to, first of all, recognize the risks, secondly, to mitigate them, and thirdly, to put in place the kind of measures from contingency plans should an oil spill occur, security plans in case something were to happen to one of the crew that is undertaking this operation. At the end of the day, we have done everything to be confident that we are where we can be, but we're not complacent. Things can always go wrong, and we try to be as prepared as possible.
How are you preparing for complications or even a worst-case scenario here?
Well, right now we are trying to eliminate the chances of a worst-case scenario occurring. That's why we contracted one of the leading salvage companies in the world. It is now with its technical vessel parked right next to the FSO Safer. For a number of days now, technicians have been, first of all, assessing the state and condition of the FSO Safer, taking tests in order to measure the buildup of explosive gases in the tanks, preparing the pumping of inert gas into the tanks to reduce the risks of explosion, and preparing essentially a series of steps that will make the ship-to-ship transfer, namely the pumping of the oil from one vessel to another, as smooth as possible. There will be pumps that will be inserted into each tank individually. We will continue to monitor this operation. We have a number of international experts that are on the vessel right now monitoring every step and validating all the precautions we have taken.
We don't want to be overly pessimistic here, but I do want you to give us a sense of the magnitude of the ecological risks here if something does indeed go wrong in this mission.
Absolutely, and this is actually the reason why we are there right now in the Red Sea on behalf of the international community. The United Nations took the decision to step into a conflict zone and to try and facilitate, first of all, through our UN resident coordinator and his team in Yemen, an agreement between the parties. Secondly, to be able with UNDP to contract the world's leading experts to try and undertake this operation. But The first and clear message is, should we not do this, it is almost inevitable that the worst case scenario will occur, the breaking up of the tanker, and with that over 1 million barrels of oil spilling into the Red Sea with catastrophic consequences, not only for marine life, but for hundreds of thousands of people, for the tourism sector, for desalination plants, for the fisheries industry, because fish stocks could take up to a quarter century to even begin to recover. So it just gives you a sense of the magnitude. And again, for those who may remember one of the great catastrophes with an oil tanker, the Exxon Valdez, this tanker has 4 times the amount of oil on board, and therefore were it to break apart, it would indeed be a catastrophe, perhaps in terms of an oil spill without precedent.
Yeah, so an unprecedented environmental catastrophe of possible global repercussions. Why did it take until now to act, and why did this rescue mission have to be crowdfunded?
Well, first of all, Yemen tragically has been in a state of conflict for over 7 years now, which means that in such a situation where the internationally recognized government formally owns the oil company which owns the oil tanker, but the tanker itself is actually moored off the coast of a part of Yemen that is under the control of the de facto authorities, as we refer to them, headquartered in Sana'a. Negotiating access in a very conflictual situation took a long time. Secondly, trying to mobilize the international community to essentially fund a major operation like this took longer than expected. And then in the midst of almost being ready, the war in Ukraine suddenly led to a massive explosion of prices for oil tankers, because we had to purchase a very large crude carrier, as they're called, in order to bring it alongside the FSO Safer. So again, we had to go out and fundraise. And as I speak to you, and we took the very daring decision to actually proceed with this operation, we are still 14 million short of this emergency funding operation. So as I speak to you, we have a crew right next to the FSO Safer, and we are still working the phones in order to raise the remaining amounts of money that are needed to be able to conduct this operation.
An operation that is in all of our interests. Achim Steiner, head of the UNDP, thank you so much for your insights and best of luck.
Thank you.
Well, Marcos Orellana is the UN Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights. He's also a professor at the George Washington University School of Law. What's your assessment of the salvage mission the UN is undertaking?
The UN mission is a very welcome development. It has taken many months in the planning. It involves engagement and coordination of a range of actors, from the technical team that's currently in the water to the political entities of the United Nations that have enabled safe access to the Safer, and of course to the states and others that are footing the bill. Given the potentially catastrophic threat that is posed by the Safer, the importance of safely removing oil from it cannot be overstated.
So what are the challenges facing engineers right now?
Well, there are various risks facing the mission, and they're quite serious. The Safer is an old and decaying structure that has not been properly maintained for years. So there is the risk that it may simply break apart due to changes in pressure as the oil is pumped out. This would cause a massive oil spill. There is also the risk of explosion, given the highly flammable and volatile compounds in the Safer, and this could expose millions to hazardous air pollution.
And a massive oil spill, what would be the ecological risks then?
Well, an oil spill would be catastrophic for the environment, also for the human rights of people in the Yemen and in the region. More than 2 million people in coastal fishing communities would be devastated almost instantly. An oil spill would also close the ports of Hodeida and Salif, which are essential for bringing food and medicines to millions of people in war-torn Yemen. This would aggravate Yemen's humanitarian crisis. And given that there's more than 1 million barrels on the Safer, a major oil spill would cause widespread and long-lasting damage to the environment in the Red Sea and the region. The estimates of cleanup have been in the order of $20 billion. This is all quite significant, of course.
You heard it from UN Special Rapporteur Marcos Orellana. Thank you very much for the insights.
Thank you very much.
For more on this, we can now go to Beirut and speak to Julien Jesratib, Programme Director for Greenpeace in the Middle East and North Africa. Julien, is this UN Salvage mission going to succeed?
First of all, thank you for having me. Well, we're hoping it's going to succeed. There's no other choice than a success, because if it doesn't succeed, the ecological impact and humanitarian impact are going to be very, very, very significant. We have trust and faith in the UN and in Spit Boskalis, which is a Salvage operator, who has a lot of experience and have the equipment needed, like containment boom, to make sure that this operation happens as safely as possible.
Now, what are the ecological risks then if something goes wrong?
Well, we need to know that the Red Sea is it's really a natural wonder. It's a treasure with great biodiversity, amazing coral, mangroves, and all of that will be definitely severely impacted by an oil spill of that magnitude. We're talking potentially 4 times the Exxon Valdez oil spill. But beyond simply the ecological impact, we need to think about the humanitarian impact. I mean, it will exacerbate one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world right now in Yemen. It has the potential to block key ports like Hodeida port, where a lot of the food aid coming to Yemen goes through that port. It will disrupt water supply, because we know Yemen depends on the desalination plant and will affect water supply for more than 10 million people. It will also disrupt one of the most important sectors for the Yemeni economy, which is the fishing sector. And impacts are going beyond simply Yemen. Saudi Arabia might be impacted, Egypt, Eritrea, and Ethiopia as well, and Djibouti.
Now, this case happening in the Red Sea right now, is it unique in the world? Are there other threats of disasters like this?
No, it's not unique in the world. I mean, there are many tankers who are being left alone, either with a skeleton crew or with no one on board. I mean, this is really part of the old system that is dominating our world. I mean, one thing, the true scandal of the FSO Safer, which is frankly underreported, is the fact that international oil companies like Total, like Exxon, like OMV are likely owner of the oil on board the FSO Safer that they have been using until 2015 for their operation in Yemen. And despite that, they've been sitting silently in the shadows, counting their billions of dollars of profit, while the UN is still struggling up till their moment to raise the necessary fund for this operation. That is the true scandal in that story.
So why did it take so many years to take action?
Well, it was a very slow process. I mean, it was very difficult first for all parties involved to reach an agreement on a plan. And like I said, after that, it took more than 2 years for the UN to raise the money for that operation, which is estimated at around $150 million. I mean, they've been knocking on the doors of a lot of governments. They have been organizing pledging conferences after pledging conferences. And they even launched a crowdfunding platform asking people to pay. But people should not be the one paying for that. Polluters should be the one paying for that. And again, we've been asking for the oil companies who are likely owner of the oil on board the Safer to actually pay for that operation, which is peanuts. It's just a drop in the ocean compared to the tens of billions of dollars that they make every year.
Julien Jesratib there from Greenpeace. Thank you very much for these insights.